How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the ever divisive, polarizing, interesting Yaxel Lendeborg, Michigan super senior, and there's a couple things that you'll hear when you hear people talking about Yaxel Lendeborg. The first couple are that he is exceptionally productive and gigantic, and that size really shows up on the defensive end. He has a 7'4" wingspan, which absolutely shows. He measured at last year's combine, and you can see how much ground he can just cover sticking his arms out. He makes it hard to do dribble handoffs, basic passing actions. He's going to get a dig in here and disrupt this handle, and he's going to ultimately get a steal when he's barely even looking at getting a steal before the ball is flying next to him. He stabs his left arm out, and that's a steal. Merez Johnson picks it up. And Yaxel's size is truly elite. Big shout out to Brian D for 3 on Twitter, who replied to one of my Yaxel tweets today where I talked about his ridiculous size as a small forward, which is going to be an interesting question of what position he can play. We'll get to that, of course, but huge wingspan, 92nd percentile even for power forwards. The athletic testing wasn't crazy. I don't value athletic testing a ton, but I do think some of it is legit and checks out. But if Yaxel is compared to small forwards, 7th in height, 2nd in wingspan, 8th in wingspan differential according to the data baller positional classifications, and that is all over his tape. But the second thing you hear about Yaxel Lendeborg is, yeah, but he's old. And yes, Yaxel Lendeborg is old. He's going to be 24 on draft night, 25 as a rookie. But I'm here to tell you should not worry about that. And we're going to lay all of that out in this video. So like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Always appreciate the support on the channel. And like we said, Yaxel's blend of size and feel for the game and processing is what makes him, to me, a pretty locked in, like top 20-ish plus caliber prospect, where he reads this player's intention to pass to the interior, slides down and gets the steal. Yaxel's sheer size and length are going to be annoying as hell for players to pass around. Just being in the vicinity of another player in a pass can be enough for Yaxel to get his hands on a ball and tip it out. But before we continue to talk about his game, I'd like to talk about some of the main age-related refrain. And I think there's obviously like truth to the idea that 22-plus-year-old players who get drafted, older players who get drafted, there are a lot of busts and players who just don't stick around, right? Only so many lottery picks since 2008, 22-plus overall. But Yaxel Lendeborg breaks so much of why age is an important proxy for development. More important to me than a prospect's age is the age that prospect broke out. They became an impact player at the college level or wherever. Yaxel was the JUCO guy because of off-court stuff, and the second he started at UAB, he was dominant. 6.2 BPM is great for a first-year college player, 23% usage. This was his age 21 season. You can see all the ways he's impacted the game, and he's kept improving. That steady development curve, another good indicator that an older player getting drafted can continue developing. And if we look at so many of the busts here in this older division, that early breakout age continues to come up. Freshman and sophomore Davion Mitchell was pretty much a nothing, especially as a freshman at Auburn. Took until his junior year to break out. And when people say, oh, don't draft old prospects, they're only good because they're playing against older players, that is true for some people. Chris Duarte was, I believe, 22 in his first college season, so he doesn't even have a 21-year-old college season to measure against. Looking through these players, Devin Carter also wasn't incredible. I think there's some potential for Devin Carter as well. Dalton Connect, another good example of a player who before, in his junior age 21 season was a pretty much an unimpactful player. And then so many of the 22-plus players who end up hitting or look like they're going to be hitting, Zach Edey, if he stays healthy, is going to be a draft hit, and he was an impactful player from the jump. Obviously continued his improvement throughout his career. Talk about Doug McDermott, an older prospect who went in the lottery, who was pretty much, again, impactful, especially on offense, crazy scorer from the moment he stepped into college basketball. Obviously didn't get drafted right away, but there's so many examples of this, especially if you go down into this area. Terrence Shannon was a legit prospect as a freshman on Texas Tech. Desmond Bane broke out as a sophomore. Andrew Nembhard was a legit prospect on Florida as a freshman. Draymond Green is somewhere in here, I believe, too, who was super impactful right from the jump of his career. Look at those his freshman numbers in this small minute share are insane. 7.3 blocks plus minus, crazy rebounding numbers, pretty efficient, obviously low usage, crazy stock numbers, free throw numbers, like clearly a good player. So I want to keep that in mind throughout this, and that's the main case for why I'm not fading Yaxel, despite I do value age and prospects, and I think this keeps me from viewing him as like a legit lottery plus level guy in an elite class like this one, but we'll talk plenty more about that as we go on. Yaxel's length is especially impressive as a shot blocker, pretty good block rate, and a lot of his help blocks at the rim come from him just flying down as a roamer and helping on an unsuspecting player like this one, right? The ball handler initially beats Merez Johnson to the middle, he jumps, there's an easy layup, but Yaxel has the length, timing, instincts to just simply swat away that ball from behind. Solid instincts, understanding where the open space is going to be and positioning himself between the ball and the basket to make the best contest at the rim possible, even when he's not getting blocks. Like we said, his size is phenomenal. He clearly has the physical tools to be a high-level paint protector, and I love this one. Instantly sliding down to protect the rim before this ball handler even gets near the paint. That's great anticipation. He doesn't jump, he stays down, and then he contests right when he needs to. Hannes Steinbach is inevitable on the offensive glass, but Yaxel did a great job keeping his man in front and contesting at the basket right there, and his size is great as like a recovery defender too. He's not point of attack defender, as we'll get to, but after the pass, stays down, swipes away at Malik Brown from behind. You'll see him getting a lot of blocks with both hands. That's something that his experience, I'm sure, has helped picking the right hand to contest with, and he blocks a lot of jumpers too. I mean, dude, it's just filthy, the size on Yaxel Lendeborg. You can see him diving for the ball. His effort and motor generally quite good as well, so that's another reason to be optimistic, and he's going to block this three-pointer. You see quite a bit of that on Yaxel's tape. A lot of his blocks are away from like the general flow of rim protection, and I don't think he's a flawless rim protector by any means. He will ball watch and process stuff late, and these issues I tend to wave away for younger players, but especially someone like Yaxel, who's going to be 24 years old. There's not going to be as much improvement in areas like feel and processing, where Cohen Carr is, no shame in not being able to beat Cohen Carr to the spot, but Yaxel, knowing it's Cohen Carr in early offense, needs to be over much earlier there to defend the basket, and you do see that a decent amount when Yaxel is protecting the rim. I mean, oftentimes he's usually not the primary rim protector on this Michigan team because of Ademara and Merez Johnson, and Michigan runs a scheme where they funnel everything to the rim and to their bigs effectively, and because of that, you'll never see Yaxel really like cutting off and sliding laterally. I think part of that is a physical limitation, and you can see his hips are not the smoothest when he has to open and turn chase, but usually I think he's expecting either Cadeau from the strong side or Merez to get around the seal to protect the rim. Again, the play recognition, Yaxel's kind of ball watching on this handoff was considered, but at that point, he got a pretty open look to the rim. And Yaxel, will talk about some of the solid point of attack stuff. I don't think he's quick or fluid enough to consistently stay in front of small players, especially if he gives up a top foot, he is going to get burned. He just doesn't have the hip fluidity or the light feet, and he's always trying to turn and chase to recover. Always has the length to get back in the play and make an impact there in recovery, as we've talked about. But sometimes that initial advantage is all a player needs, and especially when there's not that inside help that Yaxel is trying to kind of force to. A play like this, where it does look like he's trying to initially laterally cut off Blackwell, but he's too fast and has too much leverage to do anything, so Yaxel gets burned pretty immediately. He jumps in recovery at the pump fake. So I think Yaxel is a very good defensive prospect, but I don't think of him as like a high-end defensive star or anything. And maybe if I did, I'd feel better about him as like a top 10 pick, but I think screens are going to be a big issue. He doesn't have to navigate screens a ton at Michigan because they switch so much and they just play kind of non-traditional, like passing off on off ball, but often we'll just try to like blow through picks. Pretty decent defensive process at the moment, forcing him into that pretty difficult shot. Obviously don't want to see the foul ball at the end of the play. Against players who aren't necessarily creators, Yaxel is usually plenty fluid, big, and long enough to contest them and force difficult shots, and I suspect that'll be the case in the NBA as well. You're not going to want Yaxel guarding point guards all the time in isolation at the top of the floor, and they're definitely going to cut off the middle and try to force players to the sideline. But Yaxel, again, the speed, the length, the explosiveness to recover and block shots at the point of attack, that's going to be a great thing for him. And oftentimes it seems like he's baiting this, right? Like he's not even, this is like 25 seconds left in the game, so whatever. But it almost seems like he will bait and allow drivers to get by. I think part of this is Michigan's defensive scheme, like I said, as well, because he has such exceptional recovery tools. And Michigan's scheme, I think, is going to give him a lot of like translatable versatility to the league. He defends a lot of pick and rolls as the screener. You'll see him switching, but you'll also see him drop at times. You'll see him hedge, and Lendeborg has the tools to do this for sure. I love this play. He cuts off the ball, and then he slides down once again to help at the rim. Huge block. This is one of my favorite plays on the whole tape. Play does not end after your man passes the ball. Yaxel knows this, just uses his smarts and size to make plays, and I think he's going to be able to keep doing that in the NBA. He's an excellent rebounder on the glass, and that fuels his really impressive transition game where Yaxel has enough handling coordination, speed, size, athleticism, fluidity to spin around the defender to grab and go pretty often in early offense. He is a real transition weapon for Michigan. Even after made baskets, he's sprinting down the floor. He's going to seal off a Caden Boozer and finish in traffic. But Yaxel's motor and effort is what creates this matchup in the first place. Again, even after a made bucket, Yaxel beating Cam Boozer means they have to switch. Caden Boozer gets cross-matched, is too small. Look at the great hands snaring that ball over Boozer, finishing in traffic. And I think for all of these reasons, he's going to be a weapon in transition in the NBA. He's a very good passer, which is probably his best offensive trait. We'll get to that soon, but good early offense kick out, using his height to find an open three on the weak side of the floor. And he's a great lob passer in transition too, playing in these 2v1 situations where the helper steps to him. And also check the speed. He is starting behind all of the Ohio State offensive players and is still able to beat them down the floor and pass to Merez Johnson. And that connective playmaking, the off-ball stuff, that mostly is going to be where he impacts the game in the NBA. On plays like this, where also kind of an early offense situation, definitely an early offense situation. Braden Smith cross-matched onto Lendeborg. He's physical, sealing, and calling for the ball. Of course, a second defender comes immediately, so Lendeborg is just going to read that, kick the ball out, ball swings, and there was no assist or anything on this possession, but Lendeborg clearly was responsible for creating an open look on that play that in the NBA very well may have been converted. And he is a phenomenal connective playmaker. Not always like manipulative or a high-level on-ball passer, but he's so good. Just notices this defender sleeping for a second, zips it into Merez Johnson, who finishes strong. And his playmaking, all three of the Michigan bigs are phenomenal playmakers, which is truly a cheat code, and to me, one of their biggest weapons. But Yaxel is such a refined off-ball mover. This baseline drive, Yaxel knows he's not going to be useful to the passer sitting all the way on the weak wing, so he sinks into the middle of the floor, immediately reads the help sinking down, and kicks to the corner. That processing, that quick decision making is all so translatable, especially to high-level playoff basketball, which is the main thing I'm thinking about when projecting prospects. I don't really care how guys can play in, a random February game, but stuff like this, reading defenses quickly, punishing mistakes over rotations with a quick skip pass, that's going to be valuable at the highest levels pretty much all of the time. And Yaxel is one of the better connective passers in the draft. He's a great entry passer too, which is underrated. A lot of guys can't throw entry passes, but he needs to put this pass high and away, outside of the range of the fronting post defender, but also outside of the range of the help defender who's trying to sink. That's a perfect pass. You can see Ademara doesn't even have to move his hand. It's right in the bucket. He throws it to and obviously having a weapon like Ademara certainly makes things better. And he's nothing special as an on-ball passer, but he can execute basic pick and roll reads. Second defender shows at him, quickly reads it, passes to his giant roll man target. Height is a really big add as a passer. I think that's something people forget about often. And when you ask him to execute set plays, that's really going to help him, once again, read a slip coverage right here. They're trying to switch, and Ade is going to slip in response, immediately processing that, passing over the top to his target. It's nothing crazy, but coaches who want players who are going to execute their scheme and make the right play will like Yaxel. You can make basic reads on the move. This second defender stepping up in help from the strong side corner, so he's going to kick it out for a wide open three. It's not rocket science, but it's basic enough perimeter skill that makes me think he can play the three and can play the small forward at times, which would be hugely valuable given his size. He's got some delivery variation too. I liked this overhead pass in the pick and roll to Ademara. That was creative. You don't see a ton of mixed varied deliveries on his tape. In the half court, I think he's a better interior passer on the ball than skip passer, but you can see plays like this where he reads a tagging defender and he's going to kick it out to the corner. So I don't think he's a crazy like one-handed whip skip passer off the dribble, but there's definitely talent and potential there. I do think his vision at times is spotty. There's a pretty wide open Merez Johnson right there. Kicks it out for a decent look, but one that's definitely not as good as a clean play. And the critical piece for Yaxel's half-court perimeter offense is, of course, the jumper, which has been shaky this year. He's a pretty good corner shooter. He's always willing to spot up and take shots from that area. And if you give Yaxel space, he has pretty deep range. He's willing to take shots if he has the time and the space. And when there's light movement and confusion, nothing crazy in terms of closeout or contest, Yaxel is willing to take and make these shots, and he has the size. Once again, like it helps his passing, it helps his shooting. He can face up and release over players. Doesn't need as much separation as other players might, but he's not a great shooter off of movement, partly because of his stiffness, of release flexibility, and his very like set, slowish shot. There is room to just fire a wide open three right there. Isaiah Evans, who I just saw in the last game, is firing this by now, right? But Yaxel has to bring the ball down, organize his feet, take that right step, and then by the time he gets the ball off, it's still high release. It's a good enough look, but I think he's 1 of 8 on off-screen threes, and there's so few of those attempts because so often in this position, he won't even take a shot. He'll just pass up a decent look at 3 for something else because he isn't a super confident shooter from range all the time. This is his best three-point season in terms of volume. That's around 8.4 per 100 free throw, but the overall percentage, 32.9%, 225 attempts, good free throw shooter. Pretty good non-rim twos, even though he's not taking pull-up jumpers this year. Had a little bit of shooting ability in the past at UAB, which we'll get to. But I think it's important to note how much his role has changed over the last year at Michigan, going from strong, burly, like post-up, face-up 4 to a stretch wing big hybrid at Michigan. He can do basic like 2 dribble pull-ups. I don't think he's going to be asked to do that a ton in the NBA, but I do think there is some of that on tape. And of course, the closeout attacking is going to open up the playmaking as well. This was a turnover, but I kind of think if Ademara just rolls harder to the rim and is more explosive here, this is an easy dunk. Not the best play by Yaxel. He could have just thrown a more safe pass low, I guess, but you can see what happens when defenders have to fly by his 3, when they have to pass it over. It is definitely going to be something to debate and think about it. I'm not fully set on where I think of him as a shooter. His handle is pretty limiting, and also why I don't view him higher than I do. There's pretty much no creation upside to me. He's stiff, not particularly bursty, and the ball control at this stage, again, much older prospect, I think it's going to be tougher to improve, and he very much spams his spin move. You can see him kind of trying to load up, move his shoulder towards the baseline, but the defender rips the ball, likely knowing that the spin move is coming. He's just not a refined or controlled ball handler, and he's new to playing on the perimeter. There's definitely some of that, but a lot of his bad drives are just resorting to his power, and again, once again, trying the spin move, but he loses his balance, throws the ball away, and it ends up being an offensive foul. There are moments when it does work, and again, the spin move is very nice. Fluid, draws a foul, and back at UAB, he was doing much more like isolation, post-drive, face-up stuff, and that role versatility is actually a huge point in his favor to me. I've talked about this plenty on the channel, how I think it's an underrated success indicator at the next level, players who do a lot of different things on offense and defense, and Yaxel, he played more of a big role on defense, a lot more drop, a lot more primary rim protection than he has at Michigan, which is probably going to reflect his NBA role much more than UAB did, and he's just such a good like little things off-ball player. player. And once again, we see the closeout attack, but notice how Yaxel sets this up with the baseline cut to the empty space. He's always looking to see where the defense doesn't have accounted for, and then he uses his physical tools to punish them and draw a foul. He's a really good cutter, and I'd like to see more roll man usage in the NBA too. He definitely has the size and the traits for that. He did it more at UAB than he does at Michigan. Got some touch to hit a floater in the short roll. Yaxel's just a great cutter overall. He's always looking for the space to slip into, and that really helps him on plays like this where you have a ball watching defender right here staring at Ade Mara. So Yaxel's going to cut right behind him and dunk the ball. That's a great dunk right there. Again, pretty explosive player, not like an elite athlete. And even when he doesn't get the ball, these cuts put him in great position to grab offensive rebounds where Yaxel is phenomenal. He's going to add a ton of impact on the glass too. I think that's going to help his case to play the 4. And overall, I think Yaxel is just too good of a player to fade. I know there's some people who have like potential like intel maturity questions, like with like the Boozer and the Purdue video, which is honestly such a nothing, and I don't know enough to really comment on that. But purely from a tape and statistical profile perspective, I mean, this is a guy who I think for the right team could easily be a lottery pick. If the Thunder or whoever or the Spurs took Yaxel at 8 or 9, I would not bat an eye. I think that's why like traditional big boards are so misleading. It doesn't really matter if you have Yaxel 8 or 20. It matters what you think of him, just because there's so many teams that wouldn't really have much use for a player like Lendeborg early in the draft, and there's some who would absolutely covet and die for a guy like Yaxel, who's versatile on defense, who's a pretty solid offensive player all around, excellent connective passer, size, motor. He's going to be a player who impacts winning at a high level and probably isn't as great on bad teams, but if you put him on a good team with stars and creators and foundational anchor pieces on defense in place, his connective complementary skill set is really going to shine. And again, we're talking about team building. We're talking about playoff value when I'm building boards and rankings. And even if Lendeborg isn't likely to make all-star games, he's likely to be more valuable than some players who do, because he's going to make less money almost certainly, and he's not going to cost as much draft capital, and he's going to make it easier to build your team with other kind of limited players. So that's my general case for Yaxel. I mean, I think you could get him pretty high in this draft. I don't care as much about the ranking, but I'm optimistic about what he's going to be in the NBA. He'll be a good rotation player. I don't know how much more they'll be in you to feel motivated, and I feel very motivated right now to keep making videos. Now, thank you all, and have a good day.